Character popularity in Smash Ultimate is known to be very inconsistent. Oftentimes when we expect someone to be widely played, they aren't, and vice versa. It's hard to pinpoint what factors contribute towards someone being a frequent sight in the meta because it feels like we keep moving the goalpost around. For some cast members, their representation makes a lot of sense. To name a few examples, Roy and the Aegis, Pyra and Mithra are the two most popular swordies on account of having a very straightforward kit and frankly overtuned stats. Palutena, Wolf, and Rob attribute much of their success to their multi-purpose and versatile kit, armed with equal parts offense and defense, perhaps not overly excelling at anything but not lacking anything in particular either. At the same time, we have fighters who appear to possess many if not all of the qualities seen in the most popular, yet are played far less, even if they have a more digestible game plan, and one of those characters happens to be our topic for today. After receiving a substantial amount of buffs from Smash 4 to Ultimate, I've always scratched my head over why Greninja has failed to garner more attention than he currently has, and it sounds like I'm not alone in thinking this way, seeing as there have been many comments requesting him in previous Why No One Plays videos. So let's not waste any more time and find those answers. Seeing as the Kalos region, home to the 6th generation of Pokemon, is heavily implied to emulate France in design and culture, the final evolution of the water-type starter, Greninja, derives its name from the French word for frog and obviously ninja. True to his theme, Greninja's most prominent attribute is his speed, boasting physics and mobility that grant him incredible movement on the ground and in the air. The only two other characters I can think of with better physics than him are Captain Falcon and ZSS, the latter being a contender for the fighter with the best combination of ground and air mobility out of the entire roster, period. Due to this, Greninja's combat range can be a major advantage for him as he can battle on stage, far off stage, near the ceiling, or anywhere you want to go, and we all know how important mobility is in this game. The idea that the only thing balancing Incineroar is how pathetically slow he is a hill that many would choose to die on, so it stands to reason that Greninja's mobility would be seen as a very desirable trait, and it is. Speed is often inversely proportional to power though. The faster your frame data and movement, the weaker your moves are in a general sense. Not saying fast characters can't close out stocks at low percents, but you get the idea. No one can say that Squirtle has the same force as Charizard. We've seen this before in other characters like Sheik, Base Joker, and Inkling, who find themselves having trouble ending stocks outside of very specific kill setups. Surprisingly, Greninja isn't lacking in this department as much as his archetype would suggest. Several of his attacks have damage output in the double digits, with respectable knockback to boot. Even more noteworthy is his deceptively high range, especially for a non-swordy. Greninja doesn't really suffer too much in the mid-range department in light of having very long limbs. Normally, characters who have sword ranges without being a swordy are because they have big hurt boxes like Donkey Kong, whose moves can contest the likes of Shulk or Cloud in range but comes at the cost of being one of the most vulnerable fighters to combos. Greninja doesn't really have this issue, at least in the neutral. His idle stance has him very low to the ground, extending to many of its attacks, thus making him rather hard to hit, especially with landing aerials as he automatically low profiles just by existing. Another thing up his sleeve, outside of your standard hit and run procedure, is a very solid amount of utility, beginning with his grab, which, while among the slowest, has some of the best range in the game. I mean seriously, look at his pivot grab, that thing has mad reach. None of his throws particularly excel in closing out stocks at reasonable percents, but they have a good amount of combo potential at low to mid percent. Having a good grab matters a lot for Greninja because of the way he plays. He can abuse his mobility and range to play a dodge-heavy whiff punish game, and extending that to grabs means he has an easy way to screw over opponents who are prone to landing with an aerial into shield. That much range also means he can whiff punish swordies, which not many others can do. In fact, Greninja is quite infamous for being a tough matchup for sword fighters, notably Cloud, Lucina, Sephiroth, and Byleth. Not too sure about Roy though. His utility is further shown through his specials. Water Shuriken's weaker variants are extremely fast and can be used to gimp recoveries or disrupt approaches, while the charge variant KOs at higher percents. One word: projectile. Projectile means you can camp, projectile means you can make your opponent approach, projectile means you can apply pressure from a safe distance, projectile means you can be reversed. Real talk, Water Shuriken is criminally underrated for how good it is. Then we have Hydro Pump, which is not only a Pikachu Quick Attack S recovery, but is also a Squirtle Water Gun or Mario Flood type attack, allowing him to gimp opponents with delayed recoveries or recoveries that don't sweet spot the ledge. Finally, there's Substitute. Counters are considered gimmicky moves, but it comes in handy for edge guarding nonetheless. Greninja's fast, but doesn't compromise in power to the same extent as someone like Sheik. He has very solid range, but doesn't expose himself to getting hit in return like Donkey Kong, and he has those while remaining versatile, unlike Roy or Lucina, whose specials are just more sword attacks. One other thing I haven't mentioned yet is his flexibility. Thanks to his mobility, access to Water Shuriken, and decent range, Greninja has what most rushdown fighters don't: defensive neutral. Regarding characters like Mario, for them to score a kill, they have to expose themselves to equal danger. Greninja, on the other hand, doesn't have to. He can easily apply pressure from a safe distance and set up edge guards without needing to commit too hard on them. On the other hand, while on stage, he has access to forward air as a straight hit KO option, forward smash for whiff punishes, and with his amazing ground movement, he doesn't even have to fish for attacks. He can just run circles around his opponent and wait for the right moment to punish. All things considered, Greninja's balance of strong normals and diverse specials give off a similar impression as generalists like Palutena, Wolf, and Rob, only he's a lot faster. One thing's for sure, he's very strong. His repertoire solidified him as a veritable threat, firmly ranked in high tier according to just about every top player, an impressive placement to say the least. So after everything I just said, what exactly is the problem with Greninja? You would think with their obsession for speed, flexibility, and a strong matchup spread that playing Greninja would be a no-brainer, right? There's an easy answer to that. He's the perfect example of what happens when you put all of your eggs into one basket. Greninja quite literally lives and dies by his theme of being a ninja. I'm not exaggerating when I say he behaves and plays exactly like a ninja for better or worse. The Smash Wiki's conclusion of him states, altogether, Greninja's playstyle requires players to think like an actual ninja, utilizing superb mobility and fast attacks to rush down opponents, saving the slower attacks for potential mix-ups, mind games and surprise KO options, and remaining unpredictable to prevent being trapped into disadvantageous positions. I actually consider Greninja to be the epitome of a glass cannon in Smash Ultimate, not necessarily due to his weight or poor recovery, far from it. Taking him down requires a bit more effort than the likes of Jigglypuff, Pichu, or Fox. However, every single character, even top tiers, are kept in check by at least one significant flaw. For Pyra and Mythra, it's their recovery, for Kazuya, it's his non-existent disadvantage, for Joker, it's Arsene's inconsistency, for Rob, it's how big he is, for Palutena, it's how tall she is. It may not be their only weakness, but for everyone you can more or less target one thing they suffer from, though by no means does it detract from their performance. Greninja's weakness is that of defense, or lack thereof. Smash Ultimate rewards players with calculated aggression and pressure, but it's a two-way street. You're trying to exert pressure on your opponent, but they're naturally trying to do the same against you. Therefore, you need a way to ward off their pressure, and there are three ways to do that. Avoid their attack, strike faster than their attack, or block their attack. Greninja has sufficient enough mobility and frame data to achieve the first two, but he's almost completely unable to do the last one. His out of shield options are few and far between at best and downright absent at worst. The four options that make up your out of shield game are up B out of shield, up smash out of shield, aerial out of shield, or grab out of shield. Going through one of them at a time, Hydro Pump has a frame 19 startup and doesn't even inflict hit stun. His up smash is frame 12, which makes it fast enough to be used out of shield, but since the hitbox begins directly above him and is also the part that kills, pragmatically it's as useful as Hero's up smash out of shield. As for his aerials, neutral air comes out in frame 12, 15 if we include the jump squat frames. Forward air is obviously too slow to be used out of shield, up air attacks only directly above him, and down air is too slow. This leaves only back air, which comes out frame 5. Fast enough to be used out of shield, but there are two problems. One, it can only work against opponents behind him, and two, Greninja's jump height is the second highest in the game, but that means even his short hop sends him way too high up to strike the majority of the cast. As for grab, it's a frame 10 grab out of shield, and despite having the longest standing non-tethered grab, it's not long enough to catch aerials and sorties or long-range attacks. The reason that shield options are so important in Ultimate is because of the universal reduction in landing lag for aerials, greatly reducing how punishable aerials are. Back in Smash 4, aerials would average out around minus 10 to 20 on shield, whereas now, almost every character in the game has aerials that are minus 5, 6, 7, etc., with some having aerials that are downright unpunishable. Not only that, but grabs have been nerfed across the board too, and in Smash 4, a lot of characters resorted to using grab out of shield. Now, not so much. Granted, that doesn't mean you shouldn't ever use shield on him, but not being able to do anything out of shield makes it difficult for him to escape pressure, as he basically doesn't have a get off me tool. Being pinned down and forced to shield on Greninja leaves you with almost no options other than risk your life trying to squeeze through, but depending on who you're playing against, that can feel like a lose-lose situation. His vulnerability when backed into a corner extends to his disadvantage as well. Though his recovery is fleshed with mix-ups and distance coverage, Greninja's specials and aerials are versatile for every situation other than getting him away from danger. None of his aerials hurtbox shift him in favorable ways, on top of being slow, with the exception of back air, which actually extends his hurtbox. Since Hydro Pump offers no protection for him on the upward ascent, he's extremely easy to 2-frame as well. Though fortunately, Greninja does have a ton of mix-up options for landing, so juggling him is a lot harder than it looks. Generally speaking, Greninja's only defense is evasion. Thematically it makes sense, he's a ninja. They're not one to block or parry attacks, but in game it really sucks to not be able to pressure opponents while in shield. If we look at another glass cannon like Fox, even though Fox is way lighter than Greninja and has to put himself at more risk to pressure you in neutral, he doesn't lose that much pressure by holding shield thanks to Nair to shield and up smash. Greninja's probably the only character who goes from top tier when doing his normal thing to bottom 5 when holding shield. That is to say, he's one of the least threatening characters when defending. That's a major turnoff for players. Like I said earlier, Ultimate's high aggression environment means you'll be on the receiving end of that aggression just as often as you dish it out. So having a counterpunch tool is virtually a necessity, and Greninja doesn't have one, not unless you're a master at parrying. The notion of defense also works in the opposite direction. Just as Greninja has very few options when in shield, he also doesn't have a lot of ways to pressure opponents who shield. The two ways to pressure shield are either to grab or to attack the shield enough times to where your opponent feels threatened by a potential shield break. A common example of shield pressure would be once again Fox on the ledge. He can spam back air over and over again on your shield, and since it does a lot of damage, he can cut your shield in half with 2 hits, not only putting you at risk of a shield break but also giving him the chance to poke you at a shield. Greninja's aerials can't be spammed on a person's shield that much. His only safe attack that deals strong shield damage is forward air, which comes out at frame 16, far too laggy to be used repeatedly. As for grab, it's too slow. Dash grab is frame 13, and even then he doesn't have a nest back throw or raw down throw. Essentially, if Greninja's opponent wants to play a very defensive game and wants him to play a very defensive game, the match boils down to a test of patience for him. That doesn't mean he struggles against fighters who spam shield. Greninja actually doesn't have that many losing matchups in general, but that loss of agency is tilting for a lot of players, understandably so. No one likes to play a game of chicken over and over again. All in all, Greninja's overemphasis on evasion and movement in tandem with his poor response towards defense culminates in one very simple yet meaningful reason why very few pick him up. He's exhausting. When playing him, your only option is to avoid and attack. You effectively can't defend. This forces you to come up with roundabout answers to straightforward problems, whereas other characters don't have to, and that eats up a lot of mental energy for more or less the same effect. Not having an out-of-shield game means you have to figure out different ways to escape pressure. Not having very good shield pressure means you have to figure out different ways to apply pressure elsewhere. Greninja has to approach the game in a way that, while not worse than traditional practices, challenges everything you know about the game. In his defense, there are many fighters with divergent playstyles who are still quite popular. Snake is one of them. He certainly approaches the game in a very unorthodox way, but he still has many universal creature comforts that players gravitate towards. Out-of-shield options like down air, shield pressure using grenades, grab, or C4 sticky, escaping disadvantage using grenades. Snake is a very intuitive character despite having to play the game differently and being aware of his own fair share of weaknesses. Greninja is a character who really has only one weakness, defense, but the concept of defense is so ingrained in the vast majority of players that even though he's a top tier in regards to neutral, combo game, mobility, edge guarding with punishing, etc., his awful performance in defense is bad enough to prevent him from being easily picked up. It's like Chrom. Chrom is arguably the best character in the game. The only thing preventing him from being so is Soaring Slash. I know he talked about how Pyro and Mythra have bad recoveries, but Chrom's up B is as bad as Little Mac. I said this before, I'll say it again. If Chrom had Dolphin Slash, or not even that, Royce Blazer would work. He would be the best character in the game. Greninja's another one of those best character if only blank fighters. If he had an out-of-shield, like if Up Smash had a scoop hitbox, or if he could footstool into down air like how Steve does footstool into Anvil, he probably might be top tier. This character is f***ing broken. Probably the best combo dash in the game. He's fast as a motherfucker, even faster than Fox. His forward smash was the original Steve forward smash. I can't oversell how underrated this character is, yet at the same time I can understand why. I mean, I'm a Cloud main, I love my out-of-shield. Now, the interesting thing about Greninja is that while his presence in the US is quite limited, his presence elsewhere is notably higher, particularly in Europe and Japan. It's likely due to those regions having a more patient playstyle and therefore willing to tolerate the moments in a game where Greninja has to bide his time. But as far as North America goes, there's not that many. We have mostly Stroder and JW, that's about it. Anyways, when I think about how Greninja's main problem is mostly psychological, it makes me wonder how good he can really be if players are able to embrace his ninja-like playstyle and really master its evasion. It's true that poor defense is a hard wall that you'll eventually hit, but considering how many people rank him in like top 20 right next to Cloud, Sephiroth, and Snake, it would be nice to see people give him a chance. Don't know if it's just bias, but Greninja's such a cool character to watch that it sucks to not see more of him. But what do you guys think? Do you share my opinion of Greninja being underrated? Feel free to share in the comments down below. That's gonna be it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter at Vars, joining my Discord server, and if you haven't yet, check out my other Why No One Plays episodes after this one. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.